Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Whiteboard Wednesdays with Werner. And we have our first guest of the season today, Jean Coetzee. Jean, I've seen you running around the office, and we've had a couple of chats. But maybe for the benefit of our audience, you can introduce yourself, what you do here, if you actually do anything, and then we can get into our topic of the day, which is about cloud and South African impact of that, and take us from there. But
great, yeah, and thanks for having me, Werner. And yes, I've seen you around the building as well. I'm not quite sure what you do, but my role here is really to look at the growth of the data sciences business. So that entails a couple of aspects. Firstly, continuing to drive value into our very valued customer base.
Yeah.
Obviously, looking at growth into new opportunities and also market development.
Yeah, oh, those are great things. I mean, that definitely adds value to the company, and it's getting our brand out there. And we wish you all the success for that.
Thank you.
Only recently joined, so it's great to have you on board, and it gives us somebody else to interview as well on the show.
So, are you running out of guests?
We're running out of volunteers, so this is great. But really today, Jean, the topic of our season is around the cloud. Impact of the cloud in the South African market, specifically, from a business perspective, what we want to address today. Yeah. And maybe, some of the things that we've seen really is the advent of, data center business. And,
massive growth.
Huge.
Yeah.
And, there's different tiers of data centers and there's different players in this world. And obviously with your background, maybe you can just shed some light on that specific topic.
Very, very dynamic growth. As you know, previously I was at one of the largest co-location data centers. So very insightful to really see how that business has grown and how it's going to grow. So what you're seeing in the South African context, maybe just to talk about the African market in the South African context. Within the South African context, it is estimated that the data center is currently sitting, if you measure it by power utilization, currently sitting at about 450 megawatts, expected to grow into double numbers in the next 5 years to 900 megawatts just locally.
Okay.
Largely driven through a couple of factors. The biggest factor, without a doubt, is the hyperscaler growth within these data center environments. So a stone throw away, maybe if you can throw about 30 k's that way. You would notice this massive expansion next to, the airport Oliver Tambo, and that's particularly in Arterica where I used to work, largely driven by hyperscaler growth, but also enterprises moving into the co-location environment for a number of reasons. Power issues, obviously, major factor in our country.
Stability of that, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also the cloud, and we'll talk a bit more about the cloud, getting your data closer to the internet and the cloud. And then the other growth, also these edge data centers, these more bespoke, smaller type data centers. You and I visited a couple of them.
Yeah. Very fascinating.
Fascinating how these guys are bringing very bespoke data center edge solutions to the market.
I was actually quite surprised that, the level of innovation that we were seeing in the modular approach to some of the data centers and the way that they were, bringing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really driving some innovation.
Yeah. And then Africa. I mean, Africa also massive growth, currently estimated to be about 700 megawatts. So just showing you the size of South Africa, relevant to the whole continent. I mean, I mentioned 450 versus what is now 700 megawatts. South Africa growing to 900 megawatts. But the African market expected to grow to 1.2 gigawatts. So also massive growth. They're driven by the same factors, but I think a bit of a different mix where, you take companies like Digital Realty, massive acquisitions into big player, one of the biggest data center, if not the biggest in the world. There's always this tussle between Equinix and Digital Realty, who's the biggest, but massive acquisitions. In fact, they acquired a majority stake in Terrico. They acquired East African data center business called Icolo, very big footprint from down Mozambique up all the way into Kenya, Medallion in Nigeria. And I think you're going to see a lot of that growth happening in the African continent where the larger players are consolidating, looking for footprint, trying to get closer to the interconnectivity. So from a data center perspective, big growth still in South Africa, next 5 years, and also in Africa.
What you're saying is we should be building a data center rather than putting kit into the thing if we really want to make a killing. So, I mean, the market is looking, it's looking good, I guess. We're seeing a significant expansion, not just in the data center, but in the power centers that drives that. So it's massive, complex, and not just Joburg, but regional in terms of Cape Town and in other city centers as well. That's busy expanding.
Absolutely.
Very, very interesting. So, I mean, off the back of that, you mentioned the hyperscalers and the impact that they've had. We look at, how that has changed things. I mean, we're obviously all aware that Azure and AWS in terms of hyperscalers have been around for a while, but Google has announced that they're moving into South Africa.
Correct.
Huawei is also here in terms of the larger players, right? And then, there's a few others that are also making their way into the South African market. How has that changed the landscape in terms of the ability to execute in terms of the cloud? Maybe also some of the challenges around that.
Yeah, so I think, if you talk to the clever guys and the economists, then they use this term that the economy has moved from this physical economy into this digital economy, and it's now what do they call this data-driven, data-powered economy. So this massive growth of data needs to get closer to the cloud, right? So yes, you're quite right. I mean, the usual suspects, AWS, Azure, been here for some time. More recently, I think the last 2 or 3 months, Google Cloud announced, Huawei is here, Oracle is here, Alibaba's just landed. Don't forget our own Oxide Cloud Services, self-promotion.
Yeah.
And it's really around this data that needs to be closer to the cloud. So reduced latency, very important factor, and locality. So hence why you're seeing this growth. And when I spoke to you earlier around the data center growth as well, why are you seeing these hyperscalers moving into the African and South African environments? And once again, not far from here, if you can throw 30 kilometers that way, and you would find the on-ramp to the cloud, where all these cloud providers are sitting in central locations and providing on-ramps to clients that wants to get their data closer to the cloud.
Yeah. And these things, I mean, there's obviously a cost to this, right? And there's a way to do this. You don't just physically, relocate your data center or your data, so in terms of an approach, a lot of organizations, and we've spoken about this in one of our previous videos, we spoke about misconception. Is it an all or nothing thing, in terms of you're either in the private, kind of in your private cloud location, so you stay in your data center, or you have to go public cloud, and it's, there's no kind of in between, or to kind of transcend those two. Sometimes there's things that just doesn't work in the cloud. And sometimes there's things that you born in the cloud, and to kind of repatriate that back into a private cloud environment is quite tricky. So, I mean, we, quite big proponents of hybrid cloud approach to this. Especially like you mentioned with a data first kind of data centric, strategy. So perhaps, on that hybrid cloud, how does that play?
Yeah, Werner, the IT services and IT resources is not single or ubiquitous. It's complex, right? It's a mix, and a very complex mix. And what enterprises are looking for and businesses are looking for, even ourselves, they're looking for that flexibility. They're looking for ways to optimize efficiencies, cost optimization, and all of that. And the fortunate position that businesses are in is they can have this mix. And through this mix, whether it's on-prem, whether it's a public cloud, whether it is our Oxide Cloud Service, private cloud offering, clients are looking for that flexibility. And I'm always thinking of that analogy of, the reality of our hybrid work environment. So there are very few guys in our organization, as you know, that are strictly here from 8 to 6, Mondays to Fridays, because it's about optimization. It's about cost optimization. It's about productivity and efficiencies. And similarly, the IT leaders in our markets are finding this hybrid cloud as the preferred choice to go to, where they get the flexibility of on-prem, flexibility of co-location, hybrid access to cloud services, whether it's private and public cloud. So we're seeing a lot of, even in my previous role, saw a lot of repatriation where it was an all or nothing, where these organizations are actually understanding it's in the mix that they find the best solution.
And that makes sense. I mean, there's a level of complexity in transforming, and we'd like to hear from our audience. If you've had any cloud journeys or any experiences with this, and maybe just what your opinion is on Jean's comments around, South African data center growth, the hyperscalers that are currently available versus some of the boutique players like ourselves, and then just, that kind of approach. So Jean, cool. Thank you so much for joining us today. Yeah. If you want to, get hold of Jean, find your closest golf course.
Yes.
And Jean will be most likely know the way around the 18 holes there. So Jean, really good to have you. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, buddy.
Enjoy. And thank you for your time, audience. We really appreciate you, and we'll see you guys next time in the next episode.
Cheers, guys. Bye.